Dive. 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 Welcome back again to Submarine Stories. I'm continuing my Walter saga, telling you some of the funny stories, the quirky things, the eccentric things that happened around my friend Walter. So, when I first met Walter, it was disclosed to me that he was from New Jersey. So, when I hear that somebody's from Jersey, I can't help myself. I have to ask the obvious question. What exit do you live off the turnpike? Well, you get one of two responses. Either you get the number of where they come from, or they tell you, I live off the Garden State Parkway, which means that they're snobbish and upper class and can't be bothered with the lowly life people who live off the turnpike, because it seems like everybody in Jersey lives off the turnpike. Anyway, Walter came out with 18W, why do you ask? So for the next, I don't know, basic part of a year and a half, every time I saw Walter, whether we got up, changed watch together, no matter what we did, I'd always say, hey Walter, what exit do you live off the turnpike? And he'd say, 18W, why do you ask? Just like that. So one day, about 2 years into this, Walter's at a bar, and we're sitting there, and we've had a couple of drinks, and Walter's kind of down in the dumps. He's in his cups. He's had a couple more than he should have, maybe. And he's sitting there, and the laughter ensues around Walter, but Walter's just staring down to his drink, and he says, oh, nobody thinks Walter has a sense of humor. What exit do you live off the turnpike? 18W, why do you ask? Ha ha ha. Like Walter hasn't got a sense of humor. Ha ha ha. Which cracked everybody up. So, of course, the next day, Walter's, kind of bleeding from the eyes. He's a little hungover. He comes out of the bunk room, and it's like, hey, Walter, what exit do you live off the turnpike? Without missing a beat, without anything, Walter says, 18W, why do you ask? So, Walter has a sense of humor. He gets the joke, and he doesn't mind being part of the joke. So, I gotta tell you, though, this guy was a genius mechanic, and I've never seen anybody. He's a phenom when it came to this. We were down and we were working on the torpedo tubes, and he would do something like, shh, listen. And he'd listen to the torpedo tube shoot, while we're doing water slugs, and he'd say something like, the O-ring on the top center of the firing valve is going to go. We have maybe 4 or 5 shots left, and we're going to have to rebuild that. And you'd be like, what in the hell are you talking about? How can you possibly? He said, no, you didn't hear it. What's wrong with you? You can't. It's obvious. And he'd say, let's shoot another water slug. So we'd do it again, and he'd say, oh yeah, that's going. He says, that may be worse than I thought. And it would happen. About 3 or 4 shots of the torpedo tube later, it would fail. You'd have air pissing out. And it would be like, Walter, how could you possibly know that? He says, it's obvious if you listen to your equipment. You got to know what's going on. And he'd be able to say things like, oh, when they greased the tubes, they missed this one petcock. I can tell because you could hear the drag in the. And it's like, there's no way to hear what he's talking about, but he'd be right. I mean, this guy was a phenomenal mechanic, and he could fix anything, and he had a heart of gold, and that may be what was missed the most about Walter, because of the quirky things he did, the silly things that he did. So, to illustrate that, let me tell you how Walter got disqualified below decks watch one night. We were in Holy Loch, Scotland, and we had about, I don't know, maybe a week or so before the boat went to sea, and Walter was the below decks watch, and we were there, and it was summertime, so it was, kind of nice in that Scotland sort of way where the weather could change on a dime, and you were just, hoping that it didn't snow because it did everything else. You'd have rain and sunshine and fog and God knows what else over the course of a 24-hour period, because it's Scotland, and you're sitting there in this lock, and the weather would just pour over the mountains. But that's irrelevant to the, just telling you what goes on there. Anyway, Walter's standing below decks watch, and it's about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was the responsibility of the off-going mid-watch to pump sanitaries and load potable water, and it kind of sucked to have that watch. But he was the section leader, so he would assign himself that watch because he didn't mind doing those kinds of things. He would take his turn in the pool like everybody else. Now, a lot of guys, when they were section leader, they wouldn't schedule themselves with a shitty watch. But Walter would, because he was that kind of guy. He just took care of people. So, anyway, he's standing watch. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. He's about halfway through his watch. And all of a sudden, you know, because the crew's sleeping on board, you notice when things kind of start to go wrong a little bit. And the pump room down in outside the laundry, where you load potable water on a 640 class boomer, is called the snake pit. And the water lines are all hooked up topside. So he calls topside, and he's loading potable water, which, you know, isn't necessarily what you're supposed to be doing while you're on watch. You're supposed to wait till you're off watch. But not saying that Walter was the only guy that cheated doing this. You're not supposed to do that. But so anyway, Walter's loading potable water. He got involved in some other things. He kind of lost track of what he was doing, and he flooded the snake pit. And when I say flooded the snake pit, the water was coming up over the top of the grate. It was running down the passageway into berthing, and people were, you know, noticing that as they were coming in, they were sloshing through water and berthing. And it's about that time of the night when people are coming back. The last Liberty run's coming back on board, and guys are like, "Hey, where's this water at?" And the shit hits the fan. All the lights come on, and everybody's up. And it comes out that not only was Walter loading potable water, he was blowing sanitaries. You know, getting the shit tanks empty. He was doing his laundry, and the reason he lost track of what he was doing is because he was making his shipmates grilled cheese sandwiches one deck up in the galley, and he just fired up the grill and was cooking grilled cheese sandwiches for about 20 guys that had just come back to the boat, you know, blasted out of their mind drunk. So he's holding court, cooking sandwiches, loading potable water, blowing sanitaries, and doing his laundry, and he was the below decks watch. Well, that goes over like a fart in church. So the next day, Walter goes to captain's mast, and it was pretty ugly. Now, I wasn't at mast, but they said it didn't go so well, because Walter was trying to tell the captain that everybody does this, and it wasn't just him. And why was the captain being such an asshole about this? Well, the captain has to set an example, you know, for other folks so they don't do stupid things. And you got to kind of admit, it was a little too much, you know. But that's the kind of guy Walter was. He has a heart of gold. He's cooking for his shipmates. He's loading potable water. He's a little, okay, things were way out of hand. So anyway, to add insult to injury, he lined up the pump, the big drain pump, to pump the snake pit. And when it got about halfway done, he's kind of in panic mode. He's like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh look, oh my God, what did I do?" And he goes and he flips on the switch for the smaller pump that's in the pump room, which has just been underwater. And he shorted out the whole forward bus. And you hear, "Pew!" And you hear maneuvering say, something rig ship for reduced electrical. So in the middle of this, the captain got to find out about it because the power went out in half the forward bus. So we got water on the floor. There's all this stuff going on. Guys running around, and to add insult to injury, power went out. So there's all that, and Walter's name is Mud, and he gets a captain's mast, and he's explaining to the CO, and the CO gave him a suspended bust from E6 to E5, and disqualified him below decks watch, and going to make sure that he stands topside watch for the rest of the time that we're in Scotland. Well, Walter's not real happy with that, you know, as he shouldn't be, and he gets relieved as section leader, and they appoint somebody else. And the punishment, though, is that Walter's going to stand topside watch instead of standing below decks watch, and he's a senior E6, so it's kind of a slap in the face. But it sets a principle. The captain's kind of make an example of him, and it's not going to cost him anything, but it's except a good conduct medal, and hell, who gets those anyway? So he comes up to be the next watch, and Walter's standing topside watch. And the section leader was told that Walter's to stand the mid-watch every night for the rest of the time that we're in port. So the guy that's got it, he's some A-ganger, and he just, I'm sure he was doing the right thing because he was told to. And Walter's got the mid-watch. So him and Jesus Arzola, who's the other torpedoman, the three of us are the big three torpedomen that stand TMOW when we're underway. Anyway, so I'm a second class. Jesus is a third class, and Walter's is a first. And him and Walter are in the same duty section. I'm in the other duty section. We stand port and starboard. So when you're in port and you're turning over the ship and you're getting ready to go back out, you're in port and starboard duty section. So you have duty every other day. So Walter has the one day off. He goes out and he does his thing in Scotland. He eats fish and chips like everybody else. And I don't get to go out with Walter because we're in opposite duty sections. But he comes back to the boat, and he's obviously had a few, and he's kind of crying to me that, oh, Patrick, I really screwed up. They're gonna do me. Oh, I was just trying to do the right thing. It's like, Walter, hey, take this on the chin, move on. It's not a big deal. So we had a 3-man bunk room in the torpedo room. And the one bed folds down. It's called a trundle bed, and it folds up so you could work in the space and do some other things. And it's because of the curve of the hull, it doesn't fit right, so it's a trundle bed. And they had our duty officer was sleeping in there in the trundle bed because it's a shit rack. Let's be really honest. And he's the junior officer on board, and I can't even remember his name. He was just so junior. He was like, he'd come in the torpedo room and say, hey, what are you guys doing? And just kind of like, ensign, stand over here, don't touch anything, we got this, just leave us alone. Anyway, so he's sleeping in the trundle bed, and it gets to be, the end of the mid-watch. It's like 3:30 in the morning, and Walter has sent down somebody to wake up Jesus Arzola, who's supposed to be his relief topside, twice, and Jesus ain't getting up. Just either the guy didn't wake him up, or something went wrong. Anyway, there's a ladder that comes down into the torpedo room through the forward hatch, and Walter took the liberty of, while standing topside watch, wearing the 45 on his hip, he just came on down the ladder, and he's in the bunk room, and he's waking up Jesus Arzola in the bottom rack, and I guess he's being kind of loud about it. Hey, you little shithead, get out of the rack, you're supposed to relieve me, what the hell's wrong with you, get up. So Jesus is starting to get up, and of course all the commotion kind of wakes up our division officer, who may have been named Joe Starosta. I'm not really sure, I can't remember, it goes back a long way. Anyway, while Walter's doing this, he's in the middle rack that he sleeps in. At this time I was sleeping in one of the bunk rooms in the missile compartment, and Walter's in there in his rack though, and he's fishing for a pack of cigarettes. I'm gonna get myself a pack of smokes and go back topside, and you better be up there in 5 minutes. He says, you little shithead, you're late. And the duty officer pulls his curtain back on the rack and says, hog mode, what are you doing down here? And he says, I'm getting up Jesus Arzola. He said, the little shithead's late for a watch. I'm getting him. He's got to come relieve me. And he steps out, and the duty officer says, no, wait a minute. He says, you're wearing a gun. And Walter's like, of course I'm wearing the gun, dickhead. I'm the topside watch. And he says, well, you're not the topside watch while you're standing in the torpedo room. What the hell's wrong with you? And Walter's like, you just mind your business, little Mr. Ensign. I'm going back topside. Jesus, you better not be more than 5 minutes. And up the ladder he goes. Well, being an officer, he had to do what he had to do, and Walter didn't see anything wrong in what he just done. He goes back topside. Arzola goes back up there, relieves him, and the next day Walter's just absolutely amazed that he's going to captain's mast again. And it's kind of like, you abandon your post. Abandon my post? Hell, I'm on the submarine. Ain't nobody coming down. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. Ain't nobody coming down. He says, and he was late. I had to come down and get him. The Blodex watch wasn't getting my relief. And he's telling this to the captain. Well, I'm at this captain's mast. They've dragged me in. This isn't pretty. So, long story short, the captain turns to me and says, oh, by the way, Petty Officer LeBlanc, congratulations. You've been promoted to E6. We just got the results in. And he says, I got good news and bad news. And I said, well, how's that? He says, well, the good news is I just told you made E6. Congratulations, you're TM1. And I'm like, well, thank you, sir. But what? He says, oh, and he says, so I'm making you the TMLPO. Hog mode, you're relieved. You work for Petty Officer LeBlanc. And he's like, oh, hey, wait a minute. This isn't funny. And so he starts arguing with the captain. And the captain's getting madder and madder. He said, did you come down from topside and were you standing there with it? He says, yeah, but it wasn't that simple. I was down there and he wasn't coming to relieve me and I had to go down and he says, so I was getting there, I was getting a pack of smokes. It's not a big deal. I don't know what and the captain's like, not a big deal. You left my submarine unguarded. And I'm going on and the captain's getting wound up. He's going crazy and I'm standing back and I'm watching this and I can't believe that the two of them are arguing back and forth. And the captain gets mad and he points his finger. He says, hog mode. Oh, I just used his last name, didn't I? He says, Walter, if the next thing out of your mouth is not yes or no, you're going to be an E5. Do you understand me? And Hogmode says, yes, sir, I understand. He said, did you, he said, do you understand me? Again, and Hogmode says, yes, I understand. He says, did you come down off topside and were you? He says, well, sir, it wasn't that simple. He said, didn't I just tell you? Didn't I? The SEAL loses his mind. He says, didn't I just tell you? He said, if I told you the next thing out of your mouth wasn't yes or no, I was going to make you an E5. What the hell's wrong? And the chief of the boat guy stops him, is Charlie Dahl, and he looks at me. We call him the Master Rabbit. He was from Maine, and he had a lisp. And he says, well, sir, in all respect, he says, he answered the last question yes. And Ogmo's like, yeah. He says, how many questions you want me to answer yes or no? Before and the captain he loses his mind. He said, get the fuck out of my wardroom. You're out of here. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Get out of here. Anyway, so Walter didn't stand any watch at all for the rest of the time that we were in Scotland. But he was not happy that I was made the LPO. And he came out and he was literally in tears. And I was just, Walter, nothing's going to change. You're technically still in charge. Oh no, Patrick, they screwed me. I did this and now I've messed up. They're gonna take everything away from me. I can't believe. And I said, hey, this isn't the end of things. They didn't do anything to you. Captain's may end up getting like a $50 fine. It was no big deal. But the funny part was though, when the captain said, the next words out of your mouth better be yes or no. Do you understand? And he said, yes, I understand. So he answered yes to that question, and then the captain asked him another question. He kept going on, and it's like, oh, don't you get? I said yes or no. I answered yes to the last question. And you gotta love this guy because he had a heart of gold. He'd do the right thing by everybody when he could, but some things just escaped him. And he was the kind of guy. He was so smart and so intelligent about mechanical things. He had no acumen whatsoever for people or how things were. I don't even think he could tie his shoes. I mean, he was that kind of guy. But mechanically, there was nobody better, nobody else that you wanted working on your equipment than Walter. And I hope I didn't embarrass you. I hope it doesn't. But you know what happened, so it's the truth. And I'm sure there's going to be another Walter story. There's got to be one more here left to tell. But for now, we're going to wrap up this issue of sub-stories. We're going to close down the mid-watch. We're going to take it home. And with that, I hope you all have a great Navy day and a great Navy evening. And know that Jesus loves you, and so do I.